Her son yanked the cane from her hands. "Use your legs or stay down," he said. Clara Reynolds, 78, didn't argue. She stood. By noon, she had walked into her lawyer's office. No cane, no hesitation. By dusk, the power of attorney was gone, the house deed retitled and the will rewritten. She'd raised him to stand tall. He'd told her to stay down. Now, when he came knocking, the locks would answer first. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The sketchpad slipped from Maggie's fingers and landed in the grass with a soft thud, pages fluttering like startled wings. Clara saw it go, felt the instinct to bend and retrieve it, even before Maggie moved. Her fingers reached out, her knees ached. But still, she leaned. She was halfway down, the bones in her hips catching like old hinges, when Darren's shadow cut across her path. "Jesus, Mom," he said, snatching the cane from where it stood propped against the porch rail. "Use your legs or stay down." He tossed it to the steps, not hard, but not gently either. The cane hit the wood and rolled sideways until it thudded into the lattice. Maggie froze beside the hydrangeas, her mouth parted just slightly. The sun caught the corner of her eye, but she didn't blink. Clara's hand trembled, not with shock, with balance. She reached for the porch railing instead, pulled herself up in one long, slow motion, like a tide refusing to recede. She didn't look at Darren, didn't look at the cane, only at Maggie, whose fingers had tightened around the edge of the sketchpad, now returned to her chest like a held breath. From the kitchen window, Brenda watched. A cup of tea in hand, her smile tight and unmoving, like it had been drawn on. No one said another word. Clara returned to her bedroom and closed the door behind her with the kind of silence that rings louder than slammed things. The air smelled faintly of cedar and liniment, the perfume of aging, uninvited and unashamed. She sat on the edge of her bed, one hand reaching beneath it until her fingers found the smooth handle of the old cedar box her husband had carved in 78, a wedding gift, though they hadn't called it that. "To hold what matters when nothing else does," Ben had said. She pulled it into her lap. The latch stuck for a moment, swollen from time and summers without air conditioning. Then it gave. Inside, one navy blue folder, a leather-bound planner, a small packet of bank slips held together with a paperclip, and the will, creased but pristine. Her name was still at the top, his signature still at the bottom. And Darren's? Not where he thought it would be anymore? She rested her palm over the folder, then let her eyes fall closed. Not grief, not rage, fuel. Twilight brushed against the edges of her curtains when Maggie knocked once and peeked in. She held Clara's phone, its charging cord trailing like a tail behind her. "Want me to plug this in?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "It's almost dead." Clara turned slightly in her chair. "No," she said. "I'm charging something else." Maggie paused in the doorway. There was something in her grandmother's voice, low, solid, unfinished, that made her step back and nod without understanding. She didn't need to understand. Not yet. She would. Down the hall, Darren was already back on the couch, flipping channels like he was trying to fast forward through time. Brenda sat beside him, legs crossed perfectly, her voice low and syrupy. A rerun of a home renovation show buzzed in the background. "We could do something like that with her kitchen," she murmured. "Once we're ready, after." Neither of them heard the bedroom door click shut again. Neither of them saw the cedar box return to its place, unburied, but no longer dormant. And outside, in the fading light, the cane still lay where it had been thrown. Not forgotten, not needed, just waiting. The manila folder didn't look like much. Clara kept it tucked in the crook of her arm as she climbed the brick steps outside Joanne Bright's law office. No escort, no cane, just the folder. And the same jacket she wore to Ben's funeral, thick wool, bone-colored, with reinforced buttons that didn't budge unless you meant them to. The receptionist barely looked up when she walked in, but Joanne stepped out of her office before Clara could sit. "You brought it?" she asked, eyes flicking to the folder like it held something live. Clara nodded once. "Everything you asked for." Joanne's office smelled like eucalyptus and ink. No clutter, just a sleek desk, 2 chairs, and a framed certificate from Tulane Law above a filing cabinet that never jammed. Clara placed the folder on the desk and sat down. Inside, the original deed to the house, her husband's will, notarized, certified, and a spreadsheet in Clara's meticulous hand listing assets, pensions, account numbers. It was dated 3 weeks prior. Joanne flipped through slowly, mouth tightening at the edges. "You ready to rewrite everything?" she asked. Clara didn't blink. "I'm ready to stop waiting." Joanne leaned back in her chair. "Okay, then Darren's name comes off as executor and sole heir. We'll start with that." Her fingers moved across the keyboard in smooth, deliberate strokes. With every click, something that had once been assumed was formally dissolved. "Do you want to restructure your healthcare directive as well?" she asked, pulling up a second document. "Yes." Clara's voice didn't waver. "Name Maggie, full authority, health and finance." Joanne tilted her head, surprised but impressed. "She's young. She listens." Joanne clicked again. "Then let's put that in writing." Outside the window, a squirrel skittered across the rooftop. Sunlight caught the edge of the desk, bouncing off the rim of Clara's glasses. She didn't move. She watched Joanne prepare a new power of attorney form and initial next to each field herself before passing it across. Clara signed each line with a pen that glided. Not a signature, a redirection. When everything was typed, notarized, and saved to 2 backup drives, Joanne slid the folder back to Clara. "It's done." Clara placed her hand on top of it. "Quiet revenge is harder," Joanne said, "but it lasts longer." Clara didn't smile. "So do bruises you don't see." Later that afternoon, Clara stood on her front porch in the fading light, the file back in her hands, now with updated versions tucked behind the originals. She'd just set the key in the lock when she heard footsteps from next door. Reggie Owens, denim jacket, ball cap, hands in his pockets, nodded once in greeting. "Afternoon, Ms. Jennings?" "Reggie?" "I saw what happened the other day," he said. "That boy, Darren, grabbing your cane like that. Thought about coming over." Clara's hand paused on the doorknob. "But you didn't. Didn't think you needed help," he said. "Didn't think you wanted an audience either." He looked toward the porch step where the cane had rolled and said without apology, "But if you need a statement, if anyone ever asks, I saw what I saw." Clara turned to him fully now. "Would you put it in writing?" Reggie nodded. "I would." She stepped back and held the door open. "Then come in. I'll get you a pen." Inside the house, the air smelled faintly of wood polish and something fresh, lavender maybe, or rosemary, the scent of things being restored, not masked. Reggie sat at the table, pen poised. Clara placed a blank page in front of him and retrieved a second folder from the drawer. One marked, Witnesses. As he wrote, slowly and in all caps, Clara watched the last of the afternoon light fold across her kitchen tiles. Her cane sat leaning against the wall, untouched, by choice. And on her desk, just beneath the sealed envelope labeled Healthcare Proxy, was a sticky note Maggie had left that morning. It read, "Don't forget to charge your phone today." Clara read it again, then whispered to herself, "I didn't forget. I just used the charge somewhere better." The envelope came with a Kentucky postmark and no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakably Pauline's. Upright, narrow, like someone still writing checks on Sundays. Clara opened it with the edge of her thumbnail, sliding out a single sheet folded in half. Her late husband's sister didn't waste space. The note read, "Darren called, asked about the Boyle County acreage, wanted to know who gets it when you go. I told him he ought to be more careful with how he frames his future. Hope you've got it tied down. No greeting, no closing, just the facts." Clara folded it again and set it beside her tea. Her hands didn't shake. Her mouth didn't move. But something in her spine locked upright, not rigid, just resolved. The deed addendum was in the back of her linen closet, behind the flannel sheets she didn't use anymore and the shoebox of Ben's old cufflinks. She'd forgotten how sharp his signature looked next to hers. Same pen, same day, different expectations. Clara ran her fingers over the embossed notary stamp. Power to reassign. Sole surviving spouse. She slipped it into the blue folder marked Land, BC, and called Joanne before the kettle finished boiling. Joanne didn't hesitate. We'll reassign the parcel into a conservation easement, lock it down in perpetuity. Maggie will steward it, Clara said. She's underage. She'll age. Joanne paused, then clicked something on her keyboard. That's enough for designation. She'll need to take a brief training for custodial oversight. Wildlife easements require a named contact. She keeps a log of squirrel sightings in her sketchbook, Clara said. I think she'll manage. They shared a silence that felt more like approval than pause. By noon, the papers had been drafted. By 3, filed. 22 acres of pasture land, wooded borders, and 1 collapsing barn, preserved. No subdivisions, no permits, no new construction allowed, not without unsealing the dead. That evening, Clara's phone buzzed. Darren's name blinked across the screen like a notification she hadn't requested. His message read, thinking about fixing up the old barn, maybe building something for weekends, could be a cool Airbnb spot. Clara stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back, be sure to get permission from the birds. She hit send, didn't wait for a reply. Maggie was sitting on the porch swing later, knees pulled to her chest, pencil in hand. She looked up as Clara stepped outside, phone still in her palm. Everything okay? Maggie asked, motioning to the screen. Clara handed it over. Maggie read the last message, eyebrows lifting. Wait, what does that mean? Clara lowered herself into the rocking chair. It means your uncle's going to learn what it feels like to be excluded from a conversation that was never his to start with. Maggie blinked, unsure, then laughed. He won't get it. Clara rocked once, slowly. Not yet, but he will. The next morning, a man from the Conservation Stewardship Board left a voicemail. Ms. Jennings, just confirming parcel transfer for Boyle County Lot 417. Full receipt filed. Steward contact listed as Margaret Jennings, age 17. We'll schedule a call for compliance orientation next week. Clara saved the voicemail, then forwarded it to Maggie. She found Maggie later in the living room, feet up, earbuds in, watching a video on how to log bird migrations with GPS timestamps. You don't have to take it seriously, Clara said, sitting beside her. Maggie turned, grinning. But I want to. Clara looked at her, really looked, not as a granddaughter, not as a child, as the person Darren had already failed to notice was being handed the map while he argued over the road. Then you should, Clara said. Maggie nodded, eyes bright. Thanks for whatever this is. Clara placed a hand over hers. It's called being trusted. Back in her room, Clara folded the deed addendum and tucked it behind the will again, not because it was needed anymore, but because it had served its purpose. The land wasn't floating, it was anchored, by someone who knew the value of stillness. Clara set the living room just as she liked it, no lights, just the slow filter of late-day sun through the lace curtains. The good coasters were out, not because they deserved them, but because she wanted the moment to feel deliberate. Darren and Brenda arrived 10 minutes late. Brenda knocked like she lived there. Darren didn't knock at all. He just walked in, letting the screen door slap shut behind him. Smells like lemon polish, Brenda said, wrinkling her nose. You've been busy. I keep it clean, Clara said from her chair, unmoving. They sat across from her on the love seat. Darren leaned back, knees spread, the way he did when trying to dominate a room without saying much. Brenda crossed her legs and folded her hands over her knee like a talk show guest. We've been thinking, Brenda began, her voice prepped with polite concern, about your care plan. Long term, I mean. You're independent now, of course, but things change. Clara nodded slowly. They do. Darren jumped in, eager. And we just want to make sure everything's covered. Bills, access, transition planning, that kind of thing. We've got ideas. Brenda smiled thinly. Thought we could go over it, as a family. Clara reached to the end table without looking, pulled a sealed envelope from the drawer, placed it on the coffee table between them, perfectly centered on the glass. I've updated everything, she said calmly. Brenda looked at the envelope. What is it? Darren narrowed his eyes. This better not be one of your guilt tests. Clara tilted her head. No. This is your disinheritance notice. The words didn't rise. They landed, flat, firm, not a tremor in them. Brenda blinked. Excuse me? Clara didn't repeat herself. She didn't need to. Darren leaned forward, palms flat on his thighs. Is this some kind of punishment? No, Clara said, standing. Her knees were stiff, but she rose slowly, deliberately. It's a boundary. Brenda scoffed. You're just confused. Or angry. Clara walked toward the hallway, leaving the envelope where it lay. Both are allowed. Neither are mistakes. They sat in silence. The kind of silence that doesn't settle, it stings. Back in her bedroom, Clara didn't close the door. She didn't have to. She could hear them. The rustle of paper as Darren opened the envelope. The low whisper as Brenda hissed something about contesting. Darren muttering about checking with a lawyer. More silence. No one raised their voice. That's the thing about entitlement. It always assumes the door will remain open, even when it's been shut with a velvet glove. She heard them leave. Darren didn't say goodbye. Brenda's perfume lingered longer than she did. Clara waited a full 5 minutes, then emerged. The envelope was gone from the table, but the coaster beneath it remained. No ring, no mark, just the ghost of something that thought it had weight. That night, Clara wrote one sentence in her journal, just below a list of updated passwords and account notations. I didn't speak to wound them. I spoke to remove the knife from my own back. She capped the pen, turned off the light, and slept with the window open, letting the cool air in without asking who it belonged to. Outside, the porch light flickered once, then steadied. Down the block, Reggie watched their car pull away too fast. He didn't wave. He just leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and muttered to no one in particular, "Took her long enough." It began with a single lap around the block. Clara stepped off her porch just after dawn, no cane in hand. Her shoes were low and worn, the same pair she used to wear for gardening. The first few strides were cautious, knee joints tight from disuse, balance not yet second nature. But she kept going. Past the Jennings mailbox, past the fire hydrant where the azaleas spilled over the sidewalk, around the corner and back again. Reggie was already on his porch, coffee in hand. "Need a spotter?" he called. "No," Clara replied, her voice even. "I just need the pavement to hold." He nodded once and watched her go. By the end of the week, she was doing 2 laps. Then 3. Each morning, same time, same route. No fanfare, no announcement, just movement. The neighbors noticed. "Look at her go," someone muttered near the hedge. "No cane either." "She's stronger than she lets on," another whispered. "Always was, I guess." Reggie joined her around day 10. Didn't say much, just walked beside her, step for step, in silence broken only by the sound of their feet brushing sidewalk grit and the occasional cardinal bursting from a bush. They made a habit of it. At Joanne's office, Clara sat straighter in the chair than she had in weeks. "Time to move the rest," she said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Every account, every policy, pension, savings, insurance, all of it." Joanne opened the folder. "You're ready to finalize the irrevocable trust?" "I'm ready to build something they can't unravel." Joanne clicked her pen. "Then we'll tie every asset into one holding structure, Maggie as successor trustee. You retain full control, but they can't touch a dime without a crowbar and a court order." Clara didn't hesitate. "Do it." That afternoon, Maggie sat cross-legged on the living room floor, a stack of printed forms spread out like tarot cards between them. "Do I really get to help decide this stuff?" she asked, brow furrowed. Clara watched her closely. "If you can see the damage, you can help prevent it." Maggie looked down at the page labeled Successor Responsibilities, then back up. "I want to help, but I don't want to be part of whatever this war is." Clara nodded. "It's not a war. It's an excavation. I'm not fighting them. I'm digging out what's mine." Maggie didn't speak again. She just kept reading. Darren tried next. An email, short and sharp. "Need copies of tax filings. If you can't pull them, I can forward your login to Brenda's CPA." Joanne flagged it before Clara even saw it. "Do not reply," she said. "I'll issue a legal block. He has no standing now." Clara read it once, deleted it, didn't feel anger, just the cool click of a lock sliding into place. Brenda came in person, showed up on the porch one afternoon with a Tupperware dish wrapped in a gingham towel. Her smile was syrupy, her hair too done for the heat. "I baked those cookies you used to like. Thought maybe we could chat. Just us girls." Clara didn't take the container, didn't invite her in. She looked Brenda in the eye and said, without softness, "The girls are fine without your recipes." She closed the door, quietly. Brenda stood there for a moment, hand still holding the cookies like an unanswered question, then turned and left. That night, Clara sat at the kitchen table with her ledger open, the new trust documents signed and sealed. She flipped to a fresh page and wrote, "They took the cane, so I learned to walk without it." Outside, the street was still. The porch light stayed off. At 2:13 a.m., Clara's phone buzzed. A legal notification pinged across her screen. Formal petition filed. Request for elder review and capacity reassessment. Filed by Darren Jennings. Grounds: suspected undue influence, irregular estate activity. Clara read it once, then smiled. Not because she was surprised, because they were finally showing their hand. And she'd already stacked the deck. The knock came at 9:02 a.m., sharp but measured, not the kind of knock that assumed ownership, just protocol. Clara was already seated in her armchair, the Lexington ledger folded neatly in her lap, a half-completed Sudoku puzzle beside it, a pot of Earl Grey steeped on the kitchen counter, and a pale pink ceramic cup sat cooling on the end table, half full. Maggie opened the door. A woman in her early 50s stepped inside, crisp navy blazer, clipboard in one hand, polite smile not quite reaching her eyes. Her name tag read, Dr. Noreen Ellis, State Psychological Evaluations, Civil Probate Division. "I'm here for Miss Clara Jennings." Clara didn't rise, didn't smile. "You found her," she said, voice calm as lake water. Dr. Ellis took the armchair across from her, nodding once. "This is just a standard capacity assessment, nothing invasive, a few questions. Some observation." Clara gestured to the folder already resting on the coffee table between them. "Then you'll want that." Ellis opened it and paused. Inside, a chronological medication log, blood pressure chart, calendar notes, recent lab results, and 3 months' worth of bank statements annotated by hand. Each margin carried Clara's initials. Each entry had a timestamp. The doctor flipped through the first 3 pages and looked up, clearly recalibrating. "You prepared this?" "I live this," Clara replied, her voice neither defensive nor humble. "Prepared it second." Dr. Ellis began slowly. Orientation questions, short-term memory checks, judgment scenarios. What would you do if your sink overflowed? Turn off the valve, lay towels, and call the plumber, not my son. Dr. Ellis smiled despite herself. Humor is intact. "It's not humor," Clara replied. "It's priority sorting." Midway through the visit, Maggie returned with 2 glasses of water and handed Dr. Ellis a tablet. "Gran sets all her own reminders," she explained, swiping open Clara's digital calendar. "I just help enter them when she's stiff or tired, but she checks them every night." Clara tapped the screen. Hydration, grocery pickup, cholesterol reminders, property tax deadlines, all in here. Dr. Ellis leaned closer. Every entry had a custom alert, color-coded, synced to her email. "And this morning's note?" she asked. Clara leaned forward, tapping again. "Don't let people who sat down early question why you're still standing." Dr. Ellis blinked. "That's not bad. I write one each morning," Clara said, voice unflinching. "I don't need scripture. I need reminders." After 45 minutes, Dr. Ellis closed the folder. "No signs of diminished capacity," she said, soft but firm. "Cognitively lucid, well-organized, financially autonomous, medically self-regulated." She stood and extended a hand. Clara rose slowly, no hesitation in her joints. "Just age, managed without apology." "Thank you for your time," Dr. Ellis added. Clara held her gaze. "It's not your fault they thought paper was stronger than will." The evaluator left without another word, but she left slower than she came. By noon, Darren's attorney filed a motion to delay, claimed conflicting data and pending clarification. Joanne filed a reply before the ink was dry. Motion to deny. Evaluation complete, doctor certified, no medical concern. The judge's response came the next morning. Denied. Case to proceed, no continuance. Filed into public record. Joanne called Clara just before lunch. He'll be furious. Fury implies shock, Clara said. He's too practiced for that. Joanne chuckled. Still, I haven't seen a judge dismiss a petition that fast since a grandkid tried to claim their Nana was legally blind because she stopped sewing. Clara didn't laugh, but her voice warmed. Thank you. No need. The paper did the talking. Clara closed her eyes for a moment. Let's keep it talking. That evening, Maggie made soup. The house smelled of garlic and thyme and the satisfaction of records held. Clara took her bowl to the sunroom, sat where the light tilted in from the west, and watched the shadows shift along the porch where her cane used to lean. She didn't need the cane now. She didn't even need the sun, just proof that her name still carried the weight it always had. Only now, without argument. And somewhere across town, Darren sat at a screen watching a PDF labeled Capacity Evaluation, Clara Jennings, Approved. The cursor hovered over the page, but no version of him could undo the ink already dry. The printer gave a soft whir as the first sheet slid out, Darren's text from last Christmas. You're lucky we even come around. Don't make it harder. Clara pressed the next button. Then the one from Brenda, dated just weeks later after Clara had declined their offer to take over the bills. This stubbornness is exactly what lands people in facilities. You're not thinking straight. She didn't flinch as the pages fed one by one into the output tray. Blue ink on white paper, each line framed in its own quiet cruelty. Each word sent under the assumption that it would be forgotten or deleted, that Clara would be too confused to care, or too proud to save. But pride had nothing to do with it. Preservation did. Maggie helped sort them, her fingers moving carefully, chronologically. Here's the one where he calls you a liability, and this one, she paused, frowning, where she says, we're not trying to replace you. Just make the hard calls before your memory goes. Clara glanced over. Put that near the one where I paid off their second car loan. They worked in silence for a while, broken only by the shuffle of paper and the occasional muttered curse from Maggie when a message hit too hard. When they finished, the stack was 2 inches thick. Maggie looked up. What do we call this? Clara clipped the stack together and slid it into a folder labeled Miscellaneous Legal Preparedness. Insurance, she said. Joanne didn't ask for theatrics when Clara handed over the folder. She flipped through the pages at her desk, her red pen pausing to underline dates, highlight tone. Well, she said eventually, if they ever try to challenge your state of mind again, we'll drop this in discovery. Clara nodded. No need to use it unless they force us. Joanne smiled thinly. Consider it filed, quietly, but irrevocably. She slid the folder into the firm's estate archive drawer marked Jennings, Clara, Confidential Supplement. It clicked shut with a sound that felt like armor being fastened. Reggie knocked just after dinner. He didn't bring a casserole, just a folded envelope in his hand. I wrote up what I saw, he said, handing it over. The cane incident. The way Darren speaks to you when he thinks no one's looking. Notes from that time Brenda cornered you outside the church and said you weren't pulling your weight anymore. I remember it all. Clara read the first few lines. I appreciate it, she said. More than you know. He cleared his throat. I don't like getting in people's family business, but that didn't feel like family. That felt like planning a robbery with better manners. Clara looked up at him. Would you be willing to testify if needed? I'd do more than that, Reggie said. I'd stand beside you. 2 days later, Darren's college friend, someone Clara barely remembered, called her out of the blue. He tried for a gentle tone, the kind people think earns them moral credit. I don't want to meddle, Mrs. Jennings, he began, but Darren's been under a lot of stress. The pressure of your estate, the house, the family dynamics, it's just a lot. Maybe if you could show a little grace? Clara cut him off, her voice smooth as a blade. So was I, while raising him. There was silence on the other end. She didn't fill it. She just ended the call. That evening, Maggie came into the kitchen as Clara rinsed tea mugs. "You okay?" she asked. Clara didn't look up. "Do I seem like I'm not?" "No, but that's the part I'm learning to ask about." Clara smiled at that, then set the last mug in the drying rack. "Being silent isn't the same as being uncertain. I stayed quiet because I knew how long the reckoning would take." She dried her hands. "But I'm not quiet anymore." At the far end of the counter, a manila envelope waited, addressed to Clara's financial advisor. Inside, a full copy of the trust, the healthcare proxy, and the capacity assessment. And now, the timeline. Not for battle, for proof. Outside, the porch light stayed off, but Reggie's was on next door. And down the street, Darren stared at a court summons for an evidentiary review. He wouldn't be able to bluff this one, because this time the evidence had a pulse, and her silence had become a shield. The notary's pen hovered for only a second before sealing the page with a final stroke of blue ink. The document sat between them on the oak table, anchored by a brass paperweight shaped like an acorn. It read, "Transfer of contingent beneficiary. Property title, 113 Hartwell Lane. Beneficiary, Margaret Maggie Jennings." Joanne tapped the page once. "Filed within the hour. If anything happens to you, it's hers. Immediately. No probate, no delay." Clara nodded. "Good." The weight in her chest didn't lift, but it moved, shifted to somewhere she could carry it. Maggie sat to the side, her hands in her lap, unsure whether to celebrate or apologize. At the bank, Clara was already waiting in the corner chair with her ID and trust papers laid out before the manager had finished his coffee. She opened a custodial account for Maggie, initial deposit logged, auto transfer set monthly. "Purpose of account?" the manager asked, not looking up. Clara leaned slightly forward. "To give someone a start I never got." The man glanced up at that, but she didn't elaborate. She was done doing other people's work for them. That night, the front porch smelled faintly of jasmine. Maggie sat curled in the porch swing, the custodial account pamphlet open in her lap. "You're sure about this?" she asked, not looking up. "You really think I deserve all of it?" Clara looked out toward the darkened end of the street, the one that used to hold hope and now mostly held indifference. "I've already paid for what I didn't deserve," she said softly. "You don't have to earn what was never offered to me." Maggie was quiet for a long moment, then whispered, "Okay." Not with certainty, but with something deeper, trust. Joanne came by the next morning, her briefcase thinner than usual. "I've drafted the legacy trust," she said, sliding a single folder across the kitchen table. "Just Maggie, no secondary heirs, no charitable remainders, simple, sealed, direct." Clara flipped to the signature page. Her name went down steady. Maggie's would be added in time. Joanne didn't say much. She just closed the file with a click and said, "This one will outlive all the noise." Later that day, Clara's voicemail pinged with a message. Brenda's voice too cheery by half. "Hi, Clara. Just thinking about everything lately. Darren's still upset, of course, but I keep telling him we're still family, you know? Just let me know when you're ready to talk, or maybe we can come by. I'll bring those lemon cookies you like." Clara listened to the whole thing. Once, then deleted it. No reply, no more wasted lemon cookies. That evening, Clara sat on the back step with her hands in the soil. Not planting, not pruning, just grounding. Maggie joined her, barefoot, journal in hand. "You ever think they'll stop trying?" she asked, eyes toward the horizon. Clara wiped her hands on a towel and leaned back. "No, but that's why we built this to last." Maggie flipped open the journal. Inside, notes about tree rings, inheritance laws, quotes she hadn't attributed. She hesitated. "What if someday I forget how it got built?" Clara's hand rested gently on hers. "Then remember this. Your name was the first one I added that wasn't a correction. It was a decision." Later, as the porch light came on, a small envelope slid through the front mail slot. No return address, just typed initials in the corner. DJ'd at Clara didn't pick it up. She didn't have to. She simply bent down, placed her foot over it gently, and looked to Maggie, who stood in the doorway. "What now?" Maggie asked. Clara straightened slowly. "Now we don't check for storms. We check the locks." The envelope remained there, untouched. and behind it, the deed to a future built brick by brick, without apology. The final trust packet arrived in a sealed navy envelope, hand-delivered by courier just after noon. Clara didn't open it right away. She let it sit on the table beneath the kitchen window, beside a half-peeled orange and the folded remains of yesterday's Lexington ledger. When she finally slid a letter opener beneath the flap, the weight of what was inside didn't surprise her. It only confirmed what she already knew. The house, the pension, the insurance policies, and every dollar left from 47 years of shared work had all been moved into one name. Hers. And after her, only one other. Maggie. Joanne came by that afternoon to go over the final execution summary. No coffee this time, just legal precision wrapped in quiet finality. "Every asset is now protected under the binding trust," she said, flipping the folder open. "Revocable up to your death, irrevocable after. Darren and Brenda are removed completely. No successors, no fallback clauses. This doesn't bend." Clara traced the bold letters that read, "Successor trustee, Margaret Jennings. Alternate trustee, Grace Sullivan." She didn't ask for reassurance. She signed the final confirmation page, date aligned to the left, then closed the folder as if sealing something that had waited too long to be named. "It's done?" Joanne said. "No," Clara replied. "It's free." The next morning, Clara mailed a letter to the editor of the Bluegrass Senior Review. No stamp needed. She'd been a contributing member since 2006. The title was short, deliberate. "To those who mistook my legs for weakness." It wasn't an exposé. It wasn't a takedown. It was a quiet manifesto. "I walked slower because I carried more. I didn't fall behind. I just stopped letting others dictate the pace. Inheritance is not a birthright. It's a measure of presence. And if you were only standing nearby to wait your turn, then you were never really standing with me." Within days, the letter found its way through the network of local garden clubs, book circles, and church bulletin boards. Clara didn't track its path. She didn't need to. She saw it in the way the checker at the grocery store paused before bagging her apples, in how the woman from 3 doors down waved a little longer than usual, in how the mailman smiled, not politely, but in recognition. 4 days later, there was a knock at the door, light, hesitant. Clara opened it to find a woman with gray curls tucked beneath a ball cap, holding a plastic binder to her chest. "You don't know me," she said, "but I read your letter. My daughter printed it out and left it on my dresser. I haven't updated my will in 10 years. She looked down, then back up. "But I'm going to." Clara said nothing for a moment, then opened the door just wide enough. "Come in, I'll make tea." That evening, Maggie watched from the edge of the porch as Clara stood with the woman beside the garden bed, pointing out which roots needed trimming and which would grow back stronger with less interference. "They're hardy," Clara said, gesturing to the sedum. "People underestimate what doesn't bloom loud." The woman nodded. "You just saved me. You don't even know it." Clara didn't correct her. She just knelt, pressed 2 fingers into the soil, and smiled. That night, Clara placed the legal trust in her desk drawer, wrapped in a silk scarf Ben had given her for her 50th birthday. Not to hide it, but to keep it from dust. The doorbell rang once just after midnight. No voice, no knock, just a quiet thump on the step. When Clara opened the door, she saw the envelope, this time from a firm out of Louisville. Inside, formal petition to reopen estate review, filed by Darren Jennings, claiming undue influence by Margaret Jennings and attorney Joanne Bright. Clara's hands didn't shake. She read every word, then calmly placed it in the folder labeled Attempts. Beside it, she wrote a single note in her ledger. "Entitlement always fights louder once it realizes it's been evicted." Across town, Darren stared at a phone that refused to ring with sympathy. Brenda scrolled through old texts, searching for language they could no longer take back. And back on Hartwell Lane, Clara tucked the blanket around her legs, eyes on the porch where Reggie's light still burned steady. Because some things once claimed never need to be reclaimed. Major twist number 2, Darren's last-ditch legal strike has begun, but the house, the trust, the truth, they've already slipped from his reach. The cane wasn't for weakness, it was for memory. Clara gripped it loosely in one hand as she entered courtroom 2B, her other arm steady at her side, a black accordion folder tucked beneath it. She walked with deliberation, neither fragile nor proud, just as someone who had no reason to hurry. Maggie followed a few steps behind, hair pulled back, spine straight, her boots clicking quietly on the polished tile. Joanne was already seated at the front table, glasses low on her nose, her pen unsheathed like a weapon waiting to be summoned. Darren looked up from the petitioner's table and froze. He hadn't expected the cane. He hadn't expected her to walk in under her own power at all. The judge, a man in his early 60s with close-cropped gray hair and the demeanor of someone who didn't care for theatrics, glanced down at the case summary. "Petition for capacity reassessment," he said, alleging undue influence, potential cognitive decline, and estate manipulation. He looked to Darren's attorney, a sharp-jawed associate from the Louisville firm. "Mr. Carlyle, you may proceed." Carlyle stood and launched into phrasing built for doubt. "She's acted with increasing secrecy, removed family from legal documents, and redirected significant assets to her granddaughter and personal attorney. The question before the court is not whether Ms. Jennings is kind, but whether she's competent." He smiled thinly. "We argue she's been steered." Joanne rose next, voice even. "What they call steering, Your Honor, is called clarity. We have no burden of proof today, but we brought it anyway." She placed 2 exhibits on the bench, Clara's capacity evaluation from Dr. Ellis and the certified trust documents, time-stamped and notarized. "We also bring testimony." Maggie took the stand first. Her voice didn't tremble. It didn't soar. It settled. "She didn't ask me to help because she was weak," Maggie said. "She let me help because I was already there, before the fights, before the paperwork, before the cane." She paused, looked at Darren. "She helped me more than I helped her. You don't see that because you were never watching." Next came Reggie, ball cap off, shirt tucked in, boots polished. "They treated her like she was dying," he said plainly. But she was planning. She was walking the block before sunrise while they were filing papers behind her back. He glanced toward Clara. "She doesn't need me to speak for her. But if I didn't, that'd be the real failure." Carlyle tried to interject. Twice. The judge lifted a hand. "I've read the evaluation," he said, tapping the report. "Doctor signed. Observed, verified. No signs of impairment. No undue influence." He turned to Darren, whose eyes darted between the exhibits on the bench and the cane now leaning against Clara's chair. "You brought a claim with no new evidence, no medical basis, and no standing." He tapped his gavel once. "Fraud claim denied. Petition dismissed. Further filings of this nature will be considered frivolous and subject to sanctions." Clara didn't move, didn't blink, just nodded once. It was the only punctuation she needed. Outside, the spring air was warm against the courthouse steps. Clara didn't speak as they descended, Maggie beside her, Joanne a step behind, Reggie trailing loosely with his hands in his coat pockets. At the curb, a small breeze tugged at the edge of her sleeve. Clara adjusted her grip on the cane. It didn't hurt to hold it, but it didn't help either. "I brought this," she said softly, "so they'd remember what they threw away." Maggie looked at her. "Are you keeping it?" Clara turned to the trash bin at the corner of the sidewalk. She let the cane fall in gently. "No," she said. "I'm done carrying symbols for people who never learned what they meant." Back home, Clara placed the court ruling inside the same silk-lined drawer that held her final trust. Then she lit a lavender candle and sat in the sunroom with a book, knees folded, hands at rest. Across town, Darren checked his inbox for an apology that would never come. Brenda stared at the porch light that had once stayed on for them and realized it was never a beacon, it was a boundary. And on Hartwell Lane, the trash had been picked up by evening. The cane was gone, but Clara was still standing. Maggie wore the ring on a chain now, tucked just beneath the collar of her t-shirt, where it lay against her skin like something both sacred and weightless. She didn't fidget with it, didn't flash it. Most days, no one even knew it was there. But Clara did. She saw it when Maggie bent forward to fill the kettle, when the chain dipped into view as she watered the porch ferns. It glinted quietly, like a secret kept for the right reasons. They were sorting through old postcards one afternoon, Clara in her armchair, Maggie on the rug at her feet, when Maggie's fingers touched the ring and hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" she said, not looking up. Clara set down the postcard. "Always." "When did you stop wearing it?" Clara's hand moved instinctively to the place on her finger that had once carried its imprint. It wasn't a wince. It was something deeper. A muscle memory. "I took it off the night Darren said, 'Use your legs or stay down.'" Maggie looked up, startled. "I wore it for 48 years, Clara continued. "Through arthritis, through grief, through winters that lasted too long. But I wasn't going to let it sit on the same hand that had to catch a railing just to stand up in front of my son." The silence that followed wasn't fragile. It was sturdy. Maggie touched the ring again. "Do you want me to return it, if things change?" Clara shook her head, slow and sure. "If they ever ask about it," she said, "just tell them you buried it in something that grew." Maggie smiled, small but real. "I already did," she whispered. Joanne came by the next morning, no suit, no briefcase, just a laptop and a thermos of mint tea. They sat in the kitchen while the morning light curved through the blinds, painting soft stripes across the paperwork between them. "I've filed the final estate updates with the Secretary of State," Joanne said, clicking through the confirmation screens. "It's all finalized, recorded, archived. If they try again, it won't stick." Clara sipped her tea, the heat warming the base of her palms. "It's not just for me anymore." "I know," Joanne said. "It's for whoever holds that ring." She didn't point. She didn't have to. That afternoon, a new voicemail arrived. Brenda's voice. Again. This time softer, practiced. "Clara, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how all this went. I don't know how things got so twisted. We were only ever trying to help. Can we sit down? Just us. No agenda. No lawyers. I think you owe yourself that closure." Clara deleted it before it ended. She didn't need to listen for the hook. She already knew the script. At dusk, Maggie found her on the porch, trimming the last of the rose branches for drying. The voicemail came through. Maggie said, settling beside her. "I know. You're not going to answer?" Clara shook her head. "She doesn't want closure," she said. "She wants access. There's a difference." They sat in silence for a while. Somewhere a dog barked in the distance. Wind tugged gently at the hem of Clara's cardigan. "I think I'll get the ring resized," Maggie said suddenly. "Not right now, but someday. I want to wear it where it was meant to be." Clara didn't reply at first. Then, softly, "When you do, let it mean something they can't trace back to me. Let it be yours, not inherited, earned." That night, Clara opened her cedar box for the last time. Inside, 2 letters, a small velvet pouch, and a folded photo of Ben planting tomatoes in the backyard. She added a 3rd letter, unsigned, undated. Just a single line. "The things that matter are never lost. They're just passed forward." She sealed the box again, not as a vault, as a handoff. The next morning, a letter arrived from a paralegal in Louisville. New stationery, new signature, but the same message. "We believe a discussion may still be productive. Please advise." Clara read it once, then reached for the return envelope. She didn't add a letter. She didn't need to. She placed the brass ring box inside, empty, and sealed it shut. No note, no return address, just silence. And somewhere down the hall, Maggie slept with the chain still around her neck, still warm from being close to something that had always belonged. And this time, it wasn't walking away. It was staying put. The banquet hall wasn't grand, but it was polished. Neutral linens, soft uplighting, a podium wrapped in ivy, and folding chairs upgraded with velvet sashes that tried a little too hard to say honor. Clara sat quietly at table 4, her hands folded over her lap, one of Maggie's sketches tucked discreetly into her purse. She wore the same navy blouse she'd worn to Ben's retirement dinner and the same earrings she'd almost pawned once during the lean years. She didn't wear anything borrowed. Nothing needed to be. When they announced her name, Clara Jennings, recipient of the Hartwell Civic Dignity Award, Maggie was already filming. Clara stood without hesitation. No cane, no assistance. Just her. At the podium, she didn't clear her throat or fumble with pages. She unfolded one small slip of paper and placed it on the stand like a grocery list, necessary, but brief. "I've been told I should thank everyone," she began, "but I won't. Not everyone helped me get here." A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the room. Respectful, awake. She continued, "No one takes your dignity. They wait for you to hand it over. Sometimes they call it love. Sometimes they call it concern. But really, it's just control in kinder clothes." Her fingers didn't tremble. She wasn't reading. She was remembering. "And when you finally say no, when you stop waiting to be asked nicely, they call it bitterness or revenge or being unwell." She paused. "They're wrong." A beat of silence. Then, "I stood up because I was tired of kneeling in conversations that treated me like luggage. I'm not being carried anymore." A breath. A hush. Then the line that would circle through inboxes and group chats for weeks. This wasn't about taking something back. It was about building something forward. Applause started small, then surged. By the time she stepped off the stage, Maggie was already crying. Back home, Clara changed out of her blouse and into her house shoes. Maggie placed the award plaque, etched wood, gold-lettered, on the hallway console beside Ben's photo. The photo was old, slightly crooked in the frame, his sleeves rolled up, eyes half laughing, caught mid-rake in a backyard full of nothing special. Clara stood beside it, her fingers brushing the edge of the award. "You think he'd be proud?" Maggie asked softly. Reggie answered from the doorway. "He would have clapped the hardest." Clara turned slightly. "He saw this coming," she said. "He just didn't want me to face it alone." Reggie stepped farther in, tipping his cap toward the plaque. "Well, you didn't." Later that night, Maggie fell asleep on the sofa, one leg curled under her, the sketch pad slipping to the rug. The ring still rested beneath her collar, a heartbeat on a chain. Clara stood at the front door, hand on the switch. For 34 years she had left the porch light on. Not as welcome, as permission. She clicked it off. In the dark, the street looked different, not hostile, just filtered, like a place that knew she didn't owe it anything anymore. She turned back toward the house, toward the stillness that finally felt earned. And down the street, Brenda watched from the car. Engine off. Window cracked. She'd seen the photos online, heard about the speech. Someone had sent her the clip. She sat in silence, her phone screen still glowing, the half-typed message unsent. Because somewhere inside, she finally understood. This wasn't a phase. It was a perimeter, and she was already too far outside it. Inside, Clara folded the last of the laundry. She placed Maggie's sweatshirt on the arm of the couch and shut the dryer door with care, not finality. Not everything that ends has to slam shut. On the fridge, the magnet that once held takeout menus now held Maggie's latest drawing, a blooming vine wrapped around a pillar that looked suspiciously like the base of a porch. At the bottom, one line sketched in soft pencil. "You didn't teach me to stand back up. You taught me to stand without asking." Clara looked at it for a long time. Then she turned off the kitchen light and let the silence settle like something claimed. The envelope arrived folded in thirds, hand-addressed in a slant Clara recognized too well. No return address, just her name, in Darren's handwriting, slightly more careful than usual, as if pretending it hadn't already crossed a line. Clara didn't open it. She didn't even bring it inside. She stood in the garden, fingers pinched around its edge like it might bite. The sky was a low watercolor gray, and the breeze pulled at her cardigan like a whisper trying to decide if it mattered. Maggie watched from the porch. She said nothing. Clara lit a single match and fed the letter to the flame. The paper curled slowly, darkening along the edges before the center caught. The handwriting dissolved first, like intention surrendering before confession. Maggie stepped down into the yard, the hem of her jeans brushing the dew-wet grass. Clara didn't look at her. She didn't need to. "Some stories," she said as the last black curl turned to ash, "don't need sequels." Maggie nodded. "Then I won't ask what it said." Clara smiled faintly, not proud, just steady. "That's why you get to be in the next one." That evening, Clara sat at the kitchen table with a new sheet of stationery, the kind she saved for condolences or beginnings, and this was a bit of both. She wrote slowly, one sentence, nothing more. This was always yours, because you never asked. She folded it once, slipped it into an envelope, labeled it in clean black ink, to be opened only after I'm gone. Recipient, Margaret Jennings. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. The letter wasn't a farewell. It was a receipt for something quietly earned. The next morning, Joanne arrived with her hair still wet and her coffee half finished. "No more meetings," she said, "just final filings. Everything's recorded, certified, archived. Darren can't claw through it, even with new counsel." Clara accepted the final packet, 3 documents, a seal, and a final notarization receipt. "Congratulations," Joanne said gently. "It's done." Clara glanced toward the sunroom, where Maggie's sketch of the vine still hung above the shelf. "No," she said, "it's planted." That afternoon, Maggie returned from the post office with 2 boxes of envelopes for Rootline. Submissions were coming in faster now, women writing about boundaries, redefinitions, and what they refused to apologize for anymore. She set the boxes down just as Clara was tucking the sealed letter into the back of the cedar box. "You filing more paperwork?" Maggie teased, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Just one," Clara replied, "but it might be the most honest thing in the whole house." That night, Clara slept. Not just rested, not the way grief naps when it's tired of fighting, but deeply, uninterrupted. She didn't check the locks, didn't check her phone. She left the window open, the air soft and thick with honeysuckle, and let her body sink without resistance into a bed that no longer held weight from other people's choices. Down the hall, Maggie sat cross-legged on her bed, writing a new Rootline entry. The title, "Inheritance Isn't a Favor. It's a Trust You Prove You Deserve." She signed it simply, MJ, Lexington, KY. And beneath it she sketched a vine. It wasn't curling toward anything. It was rooted and reaching. The next morning, a neighbor Clara barely knew dropped off a bouquet of sunflowers. "Just because," she said. "Your granddaughter helped my niece. Sent her some links. She's leaving a man who never thought she'd walk." Clara placed the flowers in Ben's old mason jar and set them by the front window. She didn't say thank you, she just nodded, because this was no longer a thank you season. It was harvest. Clara moved through the house like she was reading a book she'd already memorized. She didn't touch anything, didn't straighten frames or dust shelves, just looked. The living room still smelled faintly of rosemary from the candle Maggie gave her last Christmas. The armchair by the window bore the soft indent of nights, spent rereading pages she already knew the endings to. In the hallway, the light flickered once, then held, like a pulse finding its rhythm again. She paused in each room, not to say goodbye, to witness. In the bedroom, she pulled the cedar chest forward 2 inches and peeled the label from the file drawer. Household, legal, backups. She replaced it with a new one. Simple, handwritten, not for auction. The ink sank slightly into the wood grain, like the truth finally found a surface it could keep. By the kitchen phone, Clara opened her emergency contact list. A manila page yellowing at the corners, filled with numbers no longer in service, and names she hadn't said aloud in years. She drew a single line through 6 names, folded the page cleanly, slipped it into the shred bin. On a fresh sheet, she wrote, "Primary contact, Maggie Jennings, mobile ending in 0623. Secondary, Joanne Bright, direct line. She didn't need a third. Not anymore." Later that morning, Reggie arrived with a rose bush wrapped in burlap and patience. He didn't ask why she picked that spot, right beside the walkway, between the porch and the first step. He just dug the hole. "New one?" he asked, wiping his brow. Clara nodded. "She's called Second Bloom." Reggie looked up, amused. "That you or the rose?" Clara smiled. "We're still deciding." They didn't speak after that. Not until the last bit of soil was tamped down and the roots were covered. Inside, Maggie brewed tea and printed the next batch of Rootline letters. She clipped 2 with gold fasteners and slipped them into envelopes addressed to women she'd never met but already admired. One of the envelopes held a letter that began, You helped me realize silence isn't the same as safety. The second one ended with, you didn't pass down guilt, you passed down permission. Maggie placed them near the door for tomorrow's mail, then opened the screen and stepped outside, watching Clara water the new bush. What kind is it again? She asked. Clara didn't look up. Second Bloom. Maggie grinned. Sounds like a name for a band. Clara wiped her hands on her jeans. Then make it one, or a bakery, or a blog, or nothing at all. Just let it grow where people said nothing could. That evening, the sky leaned lavender over Hartwell Lane, and Clara sat on the porch with a mug of warm cider, Reggie's cap hanging from the corner of the railing. The breeze smelled faintly of cut grass and something sweeter, maybe the new rose already trying. Maggie sat at her feet, sketching the bush from below, trying to capture something that hadn't fully arrived yet. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. At 8:46 p.m., Clara's email pinged. The subject line read, "Talk? No name, no greeting, just that one word." She stared at it. Didn't open it. Maggie glanced over from the couch. "You okay?" Clara clicked archive. "I'm not here to debate the perimeter," she said. "I'm here to prune it." She rose from the computer and returned to the porch, sat beside Maggie, hand on the sketchbook. "Add this," she said, pointing to the corner of the page. Maggie paused. "What?" Clara's voice was low, firm. "Draw the roots." Longer this time, more carefully phrased. She hovered over send, then closed the laptop. Because for the first time, really the first, she understood. This wasn't silence. This was structure, and it had no door left for her. The file was closed, but the future was still unfolding. Clara woke before the sun, the sky still holding its breath in pale navy. She moved through the house in her robe and slippers, the floor cool beneath her soles. No rush, no rituals, just the calm of a woman who had nothing left to prove and everything left to own. In the kitchen, she brewed her coffee slow and quiet, the percolator ticking softly like a clock that obeyed no one but heat and time. No cane leaned by the wall, not anymore. Her knees ached. Of course they did, but they held. She stepped out onto the porch with both hands curled around her mug, the steam rising against the chilled morning air. The wood creaked beneath her, familiar but unfailing. The rosebush Reggie had helped her plant stood proud and still below the railing, dewed, pink, and defiant. The street was silent. Even the wind had paused to listen. Maggie appeared in the doorway, a backpack slung over one shoulder, a folder tucked beneath her arm. "You're up early," Clara said without turning. "You too," Maggie replied. "But I figured you would be." Clara gestured toward the chair beside her. "You got 5 minutes before I tell you how to pack that folder better." Maggie sat down with a smile. "I already double-checked it. You'll forget something anyway. That's what texting is for." Clara nodded, half smiling. Then quietly, "You're walking away." Maggie turned toward her, serious now. "And you're still standing." They didn't cry. They didn't promise anything. They just hugged, once, long and real, the kind of embrace that didn't try to carry each other but met in balance. 10 minutes later, Maggie's car rolled out of the driveway. Clara watched it disappear around the curve of Hartwell Lane, where the light always hit first. Then she sat again. Alone, the coffee now warm instead of hot, the porch quiet, but not empty, because it was hers. Still breathing, still holding. Inside, the rooms waited without needing to be filled. The armchair bore her shape now, not Ben's. The kitchen held her spices, her order, her tea. The cedar chest stood untouched, but never unguarded. A house doesn't need permission to become a legacy. It just needs time, and someone unwilling to surrender it. By mid-morning, a single email landed in her inbox. No subject line, just a blank message. From Darren. She didn't open it, didn't even flinch. She clicked, "Mark as read," then stood up. She walked to the front steps and looked down at the brick. Clean, set, weathered, but never broken. And she smiled, because it didn't matter what he tried to reclaim now. The roots were already too deep, the walls too quiet for noise to shake loose. The file was closed. But the house? The house had stood, and it would keep standing. Final line, he took my cane, so I walked right past him and kept going.